Okay, Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mars. Our Mars is conjoining Ketu in the 12th house with Mercury retrograde in Leo, co-present with the Sun, 0 degrees Leo. That's applying to oppose Pluto in Aquarius, Mercury retrograde, Moon 11 degrees Cancer with the midheaven and Jupiter. I did not finish to record the previous episode where naturally showed up in my video, and one of the arguments that were made there about NATO threatening sanctions and so on, or secondary sanctions for countries that trade with China, and that is absolutely one of the manifestations of the Pluto aspect. But one of the comments said, well, NATO need to check up on who is owning the most reserves of earth minerals, and that would be South China and particularly Mongolia. So minerals is a Sedna word, and that's something that I have to add as an astrologer. Minerals is a Sedna word. Uranus is conjoining Sedna and and here in a trine with Pluto, in a sextile with Saturn and Neptune. Um, and this is an invitation to reconsider all that I said in Jupiter point of Thales on Beechwood, whether it's the tiny word teaching, laser focused. Laser focused tends to the holistic perspective of weapon and weapon trade, and Sedna adds the minerals from a different point of view. So Sedna was an Inuit goddess, is an Inuit goddess that is amongst many Inuit gods, but from astrology point of view, this is an asteroid that usually has to do with betrayal, and she governs big technologies and the betrayal that it takes to develop big technologies. But she also governs minerals. And so I have been listening to Macron, President Macron, and he has a lot to say about the necessity to trade with China. And so one of the things that keep coming up is the notion that we can put sanctions all we want, but essentially if we are fighting for resources, then aside of oil and gas, there is also the question of rare minerals, and those are needed to be producing the weapons that we're using to get the oil and gas, or to get the rest of the resources and the minerals themselves. So what can we do about that if there is inequity in the rare minerals earth distribution, and we still want to have an equitable, peaceful world? And this is me thinking with you. One of the things is to appease Sedna. What does it mean to appease Sedna? To appease Sedna, which means that her story was she was trafficked by her father to certain forces, unusual forces. And again, I always listen to BIPOC people, to Inuit people telling Sedna stories, and pick from them the stories that actually make sense, okay? If they go a line about, oh, Sedna was a very spoiled child that didn't want anybody, and she was punished by her dad to live with a dog, and then she liked the dog, I'm like, okay, that's very interesting. But the real stories come across the father was trafficking the child. The child did not find a suitable husband and went with another person from another tribe that was also not suitable. So there was a woman that did not find a place to be free in a relationship, and she was already okay with being single, but her village was not. And because what the trouble was from the point of view of the father is, when he dies, who will take care of Sedna? And then he really, really tried for her to have a husband, and another version, he wanted superpowers or psychic powers. But again, those powers, if we look at modern society, they are associated with the elite that controls the resources. So essentially, he wanted the lineage to have resources, or he wanted to have power and control, and then to trade his daughter for that. And so there's very unclear stories, all coming down to the point that Sedna was betrayed. Her hold of her family and her lineage was cut down. Okay, whether it's her fingers cut down, her heads cut down. She drowned into the ocean, became goddess of the underworld that governs the sea creatures, and people had to appease Sedna and comb her hair because she couldn't do it herself. Okay, symbolically, so that they will have food. Very simply put, if we traffic people, if we do not accommodate for the solitary person, and not even offer them like euthanasia, if there's like rare cases where we really cannot accommodate in terms of resources, which is not the case in the world, but if we do not accommodate for the solitary person, there will be hunger. So this is one thing to think about, and that is culture. Okay, so that is one thing to think about. If Mongolia or South China is ruling over the minerals of the world, and the world is running out of them, there will be attempt to get those minerals. Okay, and that does threaten Chinese authority. And if its citizens are melting in the sun right now, then it's going to be very difficult. If the Chinese woman is not accommodated for, if the Chinese man is not accommodated for, this makes them susceptible for invasion and for hunger and all those things. But this is also true to the other nations. Because Sedna had to do with psychic ability, children, the trade of children, we can also associate that with MK Ultra-like projects, okay, particularly the Gate projects, but also the Epstein rings, and any form of trafficking that is meant to, basically what the children, what the rituals are, to take the life force and the creative force of the children, to have a creative force, to have power in the world, which is basically a self-undermining ritual. Okay, you don't have to replicate the person to be inspired by them, and what happens, people try to replicate people, is they get all the diseases as well, and then they try to take the good thing but take away the bad thing. And it's just like, why did I not do a talisman of Jupiter this morning or earlier yesterday? Because Venus was squaring Mars, and I want Venus in harmony with Mars in the background. I can't take the Jupiter and Moon and forget about literally all the other chart and not expect that to be captured in my talisman. Okay, so when they take the soul or the karma of a person, which is a part of what was done to Sedna, the occult sacrifice, then they can't take away the fact that Sedna had the fear of being hungry because she wasn't accommodated, and then the entire village goes hungry. Okay? So, if you think about what created the Rothschilds that fund for a lot of the wars and a lot of the attempts and a lot of those things, they were not able to participate in trade. So they became the Rothschilds with the Illuminati dynasty, with all those things. And so that brings us to another thing that is both Aries but also Sedna, and this is Sedna in the sign of trade, the ability to participate in trade. So I talked about the Nexit approach versus the one world, one currency approach. And in each of these approaches, we're going to be thinking about the fact that people need to be able to participate in trade, and the fact that those who try to make them not able to participate in trade by doing those rituals. That, by the way, this is how it's done. They're doing funny rituals. Then those are also going to have the implications, which means that, let's say you try to take, or you try to make somebody, I don't know, try to take the income from somebody, and then what happens is you have to deal with their problems. Okay, so this is. But when it comes to talent and skill, you can simply be inspired, and then you don't have to actually duplicate a person, or perhaps even clone them. More things to do with Sedna and weapon trade. Well, South China is not northeast to most European countries, and that's something to consider. South China, Mongolia, is it northeast to all of these European countries, to the northern countries? It's definitely not to Greenland, but let's take a look at the globe. Just globus. That would be enough. Yeah, those things. I want the European section, but with the Chinese section. World map. I have no idea what was I Googling. That is so... Oh, it actually is clear. Okay. Okay, we go to... Oh, goddamn. Can we have a point of view of this map, please? China, South China. Yeah, it's... South China is not to the northeast of any European country. Mongolia, let's just say countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, bordering Turkey, Germany. Okay, when it comes to Netherlands, it's even Netherlands, northern France, still not to the northeast of Mongolia. So whether it's South China or whether it's Mongolia, and Mongolia is sitting pretty sandwiched between Russia and China, and those are the rare earth minerals, and of course we have Greenland, which means that Greenland is already not to the northeast of anybody, which has a political importance aside of the minerals. Ukraine had a lot of minerals, which can explain the help that Zelensky get. And again, a lot of people say, well, they just want the oil, they just want the gas. Well, people need to have an economy running. They need to have resources. Okay, politics is about the resources distribution, and in a very fiscal way, but also in a very real way. Who gets to distribute? Who gets to have the access to the minerals? This is something that we are fighting over because it is actually meaningful, okay, for humanity to have. And then that puts into question how many sanctions can we really put. We can put sanctions over Russia, but can we really put sanctions over China when they hold the access to the minerals? And yet, if China doesn't, like, the European Union has an interest to trade with China, but if China doesn't play cool with Europe, it will have Russia in its, and Russia, China looks like a little Netherlands in front of Russia. And yet it's actually the how big Russia is that challenges governance over Russia. And mind you, China is not quite tiny. Okay, if you look at the U.S., it's the only equivalent. Canada is overly unpopulated in the north, so It's not really posing that type of threat. Um, and same with Alaska, and pretty much same with Australia. But when it comes to China, it is pretty populated, and Russia is simply quite big. It is populated, but the concentration of people in rural areas is not too dense, and it's genuinely a governance challenge when you talk about this much land. Okay, what minerals are in Russia? Okay, the fact that Russia doesn't trade them, and this brings another thing to the table. There was a reason we saw communism in Russia and China, and we saw the attempt to have a economic isolation in Russia, because we don't know what resources Russia has. And mind you, Putin is known to make good infrastructures, which means that we're going to be able to access those resources within Russia and to mine what needs to be mined. And that means that also to invade Russia is as challenging as to govern Russia. So this is a country that, this is why the country did not become a vassal country, okay? A country that kind of has to acquiesce to the political interest of another country. This is also why the United States is a country of thieves and warlocks, okay? That was the American Revolution. They evaded taxation, and that was their profession. They came here to steal stuff from the land for the British Empire. Okay, it was a pack of thieves in a boat that came to do that, and they hired slaves to do the job for them, which is the gold rush and so on and so forth. So mining for minerals. And then to continue to exist as a country, they had to do gigantic economic hitmanship and surveillance, because that was their power to sustain the West's that USA is scrutinized a lot for. But we also have to understand the real challenge here, which is the main economy is about stealing things from people. So the best that they can try is to steal from the rich and give it to the poor, but it's not exactly happening, because they're also governed by the wealth families that fund that. Yes, and Israel tried to solve this problem with technology and patents, but again, anything that can be made in Israel can be made in China, and it's genuinely challenging. So there's just a lot of questions with this here on the Sedna around minerals, around the reliability of contracts between countries, okay, alliances, around technology and what needs to develop technology, okay, technology that can sustain on certain minerals, around lab production of certain minerals, okay. Alchemy was there because of this very problem. Okay, they hired alchemists to try to produce gold where they didn't have gold. And mind you, stuff like Goldfield are the closest proximity to that. And so they thought about having different minerals, different things to trade. And yet again, it brings us to the old shamanic teaching, where if all things fail, we want to have a community that is difficult to recruit people for in favor of our enemies. And how do we do that? It's a sense of community that allows a sense of sovereignty. Now, it's challenging because we have to accommodate for that. So there are many big questions. And when it comes to, fiscal, when it comes to economy that can sustain itself better, then sanctions might not be so workable, And yet we saw that all markets have to open themselves a bit more. And this is the issue. There is sustaining the economy, which the Soviets tried to do. Okay? Eventually, it led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And United States tried to do splendid isolation. It led to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which some say was not to end the war, and so on and so forth. Of course, it was a ritual. But this brings us back to the Sedna story, okay? The use of wealth rituals when we don't actually have, or the use of occult sacrifice that actually brings to the sacrifice of the entire society that does that, and that includes the wealth families. Time, the fact that the Soviets were able to do their own splendid fiscal isolation for quite some time is important, and the fact that we cannot beat the allure of culture. Okay, if you go to a village in Ekveld where a woman can be free and children have rights and so on and so forth, then you might compromise a lot of the things that you weren't really able to enjoy in even more developed economies and technologies. And also it would be very challenging because if you take Finland, for example, Finland has to be quite intimate with Russia, and it has Sweden and Norway, okay, and then this line with the big giant, and it's kind of like sitting in the mouth of the whale, like Jonas. And what it did when it came to psychiatry, they did all the wrong things, and then they adopted the Dutch approach called open dialogue, which basically means if a person is saying, oh, the Mossad is listening to my calls, or the Shabak is having this and that, and the CIA is all up in my grill, and the KGB and and they say, well, sit your ass down, here you have a house, you don't have to work, do whatever, and let us hear what you have to say, and let us assist the community to include you so you have a sense of community. And that positioned Finland in a position where it can set muscles to Russia and join NATO. The very fact that it could join NATO, they bought some laser patents. But the very fact that they could join NATO is because where the entire world is doing political prisoners out of anybody that has a testimony and calling them cuckoo, they developed, this approach was developed in the Netherlands, one of the, everybody talks about Israel and the United States and Russia and espionage. Netherlands is very strong. Netherlands would want to know what you know and say, okay, how can we use that person in our favor? Which provides a lot of leverage to people, for people to be who they are, to understand things, to get the bigger picture of something, and then immediately when you get so much freedom, you are feeling amiable towards the country that gave you that freedom, and say, okay, how can I contribute to the Dutch interest while maintaining my right to be who I am? It's a small country in the middle of the world that needed to have top-notch intelligence to make it through. Now, what are the Dutch problems? Oh, people talk about the Vogue. Okay, fantastic. They talk about the Vogue. There were Protestants. There were a droplet of Protestants in an ocean of Catholics, and they had to somehow make it. There was a reason that they were being not Catholic. Okay, something prompted that divergence from Catholicism. And then to support that, they had to do a lot of things that are beyond questionable. But very likely this was a response to something that the people around them were already doing. So that prompts a certain question. And same with Finland. So open dialogue was developed in the Netherlands that says, hey, bring us all the cuckoo people, let us hear what they have to say. Unfortunately, it was later not so practiced in the Netherlands. Um, and again, small country needs to have big listening power and allowing people to be who they are. Okay. um, and that's the thing with Finland. They joined that with housing first. Netherlands didn't need to do that because they had a lot of public housing. But then there was a deeper question about what did it mean to get a public housing in the Netherlands, or what did that entail? And then there was the beginning of the abolition of the public housing. Israel is also a small economy, so the question of can we actually have competition and capitalism, or is it just going to be one big monopoly, is also present. And yet we can't go full communism because it's pretty much the same. It's one corporation. That's what it means to be communist. And so with Finland, they said, okay, we're going to join that with housing first. We're going to listen to what all the cuckoo people have to say. And then they knew what everybody was doing, what all the intelligences were doing. They knew that, and they were the only place giving people a place to recover for targeted individuals. This is why do I talk about sexual sovereignty so much? Okay, this is a blue ocean. Providing sexual sovereignty, the country that's going to provide sexual sovereignty the best can take over the world. Because those things would make any country immune to political assassination, extortion cults, and they're going to know everything that the other countries do. Ahead of time, and everybody's going to want to work in a workplace where you have sexual sovereignty, when you can do your own thing aside of the job, where you can make a contribution and do something meaningful and be accredited for it. It's actually nothing beats good culture. So when we are turning to the fiscal question, both Sedna and Neptune and Pluto are all aligning together to a place where, hey, if we don't have the big weapon or the big minerals or the big economy, we can have the culture that's going to transmute all those things, where people are going to come from another culture. And if there is one spy that noticed a place where there's housing first, the ability to get out of this situation, to be listened to have sexual sovereignty, if that was one spy in one country hears about it, the entire earth wants to. And these people are going to work as spies, are being trained and used and mind controlled, and taken all their sovereignties away and being violated consecutively, and then they're just expendable. So there's nothing like Saturn Neptune to rethink espionage and the problems that people have with espionage. So people believe they need to grow psychopathic or sociopathic people for espionage. It could be nothing farthest from the truth, because actually the golden opportunity now is to have a sovereign soldier, sovereign sexuality, the housing first open dialogue, and then you're independent of all the big economies. Think about it. Most of the medicine that is marketed today is because of the rituals that they do to try to take the creative power from someone, and then they have many diseases that they don't know how to deal, and they can't bring them back to the person, because then they would lose the creative power that they think they need to duplicate. So in essence, all those rituals are kind of looping around themselves. And when a person is actually tending to sexual sovereignty, and not to make money from putting other people in problems or slavery, which backfires anyway, then they find out that most of the medicines that their insurance cover they don't need, and the medicines that they do need, they have easier access to, because they don't do those things that are done to secret agents and double agents around the world, and everybody wants to arrive to them to have a better life. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it at that. And another thing important for any country is to develop, to look into rare cases. When we look into rare cases, we don't have to have a pandemic of them, which means a war crime, to develop the technology to treat a rare case. Open dialogue plays a very important link to treat rare cases. So that pertains also to a unique approach that we need for scientific revolutions, that is not just statistically based, but looking into the rare case, and looking, not just to look into anomalies, but also looking into the rare case. It is done in science, but when we allocate the resources to that, we understand we are not wasting money, because that rare case has so much to teach us around the cases that are seemingly not rare cases, and grow a better immunity, a better community, and therefore better intelligence, which basically means better national and international security, by large. So this is another aspect that we have at the resources that we might not have when it comes to minerals. And this is why projects like MK Ultra are so dangerous to the West, because they've been doing all the wrong things when they don't have the minerals to back it up. And thanks God they don't. Okay, so this is me thinking with you, and of course, this is an invitation to think about things more than a soliloquy, and you can take that and have your own video responses in your own work.